And welcome back to the Music Career Show. Today, my guest is an electric violinist, a composer, and a songwriter from Monterey in California. She performs as a solo artist full-time, working in the corporate world and in burlesque and circus shows. She's toured all over the States and performs regularly for some of the top tech companies in the Bay Area and beyond. Her new composition and performance project, Cosmic Expedition, is a journey through space told by artists and aerialists from Dam Circus. That is one of the most fun things I've ever said in my entire life. So this is going to be a really interesting one, lads, and it's my pleasure to introduce Razz Palumbi. Hello, Razz.
Hi there.
It's lovely to have you on. Like I said, that was a mouthful, but that was so much fun to say. There was so many fun words in there. Cosmic Expedition and aerialists. Amazing stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. So, Razz, for people that haven't heard of you just yet, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you're all about?
My name is Razz. As mentioned, I'm an electric violinist, and I play kind of extended range violins that have over 4 strings, 5, 6, 7 string instruments. I compose, I'm a live looping artist, and mostly a solo artist, and we'll get into why in a little bit, but they're for the normal reasons you would think.
Mhm.
And I've spent the last 6 years performing full time. Maybe it's more now, geez. But I've been playing instruments since I was little, and yeah, so as an artist, it's been a full-time living for a while now. I feel pretty settled into my craft and what I'm doing. So I'm excited to be here and talking with you about kind of how that manifested for me and what lessons that I might be able to pass on to anybody wanting to get a solo career, or maybe kind of find ways to create a lot more interesting opportunities in mediums or types of work that you might not have thought would be career supporting.
Oh, that is absolutely what I am all about and what this podcast is all about. I always tell people that when I was a kid, I wanted to be a rock star because that was basically the natural progression for you play guitar. What do you want to do when you grow up? I want to play guitar. Well, what do you do? What's a job to play guitar? Oh, rock star. Perfect. And yeah, you didn't realize that there was all these new ways. When I was young, when I was younger, there wasn't all these new ways that there is now of turning music and stuff like that into a full-time career. So I am buzzing to get into all of that. But let's reverse just for a little bit. So where did music all start for you?
Music and movement actually started really early. I was a little ballerina, when I was a little girl, and things started about 2, and then did ballet for many years until literally my body was falling apart because I was
Oh,
so intense about it. And that happened at 7 years old.
oh
So
my
at
God.
7 years old, I had tendons breaking and I was destroying my body because I was so passionate about it. And
Jesus.
my parents were like, let's not do that. Let's not
Mhm.
have a child that needs corrective surgery at 7.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe you need a new hobby. And I had been asking, I don't remember this, but I'd been asking to play violin since I was 4. So I was a very precocious child. And my parents were like, girl, you can only have one hobby. So because you're so intense. And then so when I couldn't dance anymore, that was sort of like my consolation prize was violin lessons. And my mom was kind of upset about it because she really wanted me to play piano or an instrument that you couldn't play out of tune.
Very
So
good. Yeah.
so I was having none of that. It was violin or nothing. So at
Yeah.
7, I started playing violin, and it was never going to be my career. It was something that my music teacher actually said when she would see me play or in performances, and she would go, "Oh, you're going to be a violinist." And being an ornery shit, if somebody told me I was going to do something, I would at that stage I was kind of like, no, that's not what's going to happen. So I was really adamant. Like you're saying you have this picture of like, what do I want to do? I want to be a rock star. To me, in the classical world, I felt like musicians, it was either you were Beyonce or you were starving in a cardboard box. Like there was
Uh-huh.
no in between for those two
Yeah.
things. And I didn't see a path for me in classical music just because I didn't enjoy the culture of it, but nobody ever taught me or showed me that there was another option to
Yeah.
play violin and not be in that classical world. So it was never something I actually decided to do. It was just a hobby. It was just something that I enjoyed the mechanics of doing. I enjoyed performing. I enjoyed being in orchestras, although I hated the directors because I have authority problems. Um,
Yeah.
so, so anyways, but then I went to university, no intention of playing music, and I finished university being in a band, punk rock band, playing
Oh wow,
violin. But it was just like the weekend thing. That was my hobby. That was my social life, was
cool.
playing music. And so again, I was always I thought that I was going to go in this direction of, which is a very valid direction, by the way. You're still a musician if you make a day job living and you play music in the evenings, or you play music as a social side. It doesn't, like, I think that's a hard thing for people to really, there's this like dividing line for people of, am I an artist if I don't make my full-time living? Yes, you
Hmm.
are. You are a valid artist. You're an artist that still contributes to art in general, if it's not your full-time job. So I think that was going to be what I thought I was going to do. And then went to graduate school and hated it. Like, hated the path that I was on, and the career
Yeah.
that I was doing. It was like one fateful internship that I was like, nope, sucks. And I was broke, and I was in school, and I had no other recourse that I could think of to
Uh-huh.
make money. And I needed money kind of quickly. So I started street performing,
Yeah.
and that became my income pretty fast. Like, within a couple of months, I was making enough money to like pay for groceries. And then a couple months after that, I was making enough money to subsidize rent. And a couple months after that, I was making enough money to pay for rent entirely. And then
Wow.
it kept kind of snowballing. So realizing through that method of kind of falling into getting to, like I said, getting away from my authority problems just meant getting outside of the normal box and going, okay, I'm now in control of my output. I don't have any kind of gatekeepers or stakeholders. It's just literally me and the people who want to see what I do and are willing to pay me money for that. And it's our direct connection that
Yeah.
allows me to kind of convince them to tip me. And that was a journey in its own. But
Yeah.
once that like limitation was taken out, I was able to make that kind of money and then go like, oh wait, this is a viable career, because I kind of took out all of the things that were sort of stopping me from progressing,
Yeah.
and it could just be me figuring it out on my own, and that made a huge difference to me. So here we are.
Yeah. Brilliant. So what was it that you were doing in university that you hated so much? As long as
I
that's not
didn't
going to bring
hate
like
no. I
PTSD.
didn't hate the discipline of it. So I was a biologist, ecologist, conservationist. So
Wow.
I mean, part of my job was like to travel to, I spent some time in Australia, I spent some time in Mexico, I spent some time in the South Pacific, doing field biology research with coral reefs, mangrove forests. I was going to be a conservationist, and that's kind of I love this, the idea of it. And then, so after university, I went into doing graphic design and design with museums. So I was working at a museum helping take research and then translate that into something that a layperson would then walk through and see. So you want that information to be as cutting edge as possible. And so I was doing a lot of infographics, still really creative work, just a different medium.
Yeah.
And then so that was in science. I went to graduate school for communications to be basically a science communications person that takes research that's coming out, maybe writes articles about it or puts videos together to help the research groups kind of talk about what they're doing accurately. Because I think that's a question that a lot of people have when you see an article published in a news source or any kind of media. There's usually something lost in translation there, and
Uh-huh.
that's a hard thing to think about. Of like, how do you need to be able to understand the research you're looking at and not just spit out an article with like those kind of bullshit headlines. Like,
Yeah. Absolutely.
this
I
is,
I completely get you.
yeah. So I was trying to do that, and I got like the internship, and it wasn't the internship itself was bad. I just got stuck in what is, I found out to be the critical issue there of, scientists are not going to give you their research early enough for you to do your job, because they're going to wait until the last second. There's no financial incentive for them to give it to you early enough for you to do anything.
Right.
Like, they are on a grant program. Like, they want their research to be as tight and speak for itself as it can, but they just don't understand what you're trying to do. And then there's also, I was in the political side of, I worked in Canada for a while at this really interesting stakeholders meeting, did all of this work, months and months of research, months working with the researchers, feeling like I was pulling teeth out of them to give me anything. We go to the stakeholders meeting, it's some important stuff, like governmental stuff in Canada, and they blow right past those 6 months of work in 5 minutes.
Right.
That was
Yeah. Okay. Fair
so
enough. Right. That sounds yeah, well, I don't really know what I was expecting you to say when you said that you didn't really enjoy what you were doing in college, but I don't know if I was expecting that. I don't know if I've heard of half of that stuff. So that's a bit of a U-turn then in terms of music. And so it was once you realized that like that all that I can't remember half of the words that you just said because they were so big and highfalutin. Um, so all that stuff, and you put that aside. Was kind of the busking as a musician? Was that your first job as a musician, or
I
how did
mean,
that
like,
work?
I had been I've been definitely exploited in high school by doing concerts as a string quartet for like alumni events that I was sort of like, this seems like it's crap
Mm,
because you guys, yeah. So I had done some like professional string quartet stuff back when I was still in that like classical zone. And
yeah,
then the band that I was in college was a gigging band. Like we were out doing, bar gigs for years beforehand. So it was the
yeah.
first time I'd done anything like that on my own without, the structure or support of a group of people.
Fair enough. And then how did you how did you structure it? Did you literally just decide one day, fuck it, here's my violin and there's a piece of the pavement that isn't being stood on, and start playing, or
Yeah, I mean, I'd been doing some like open mics because I'd moved to go to graduate school up to Seattle, Washington, and so it was a new city. So there was a
uh
certain amount of like, you're exploring the new place because you are going to just try to find like-minded people. So I'd been doing some open mics with my looper, my violin, and that had been kind of the extent of my performance chops. But that's like a 5-minute performance, not like
5 hours in an afternoon.
not yeah, exactly. And so it's cold in Seattle. I think it's probably the weather is very similar to where you're at in Scotland right
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
And it was fall winter, but I just was so desperate because I was like, I either can pay rent or groceries right now, and I can't do both. And
yeah,
so if I'm gonna get enough money for like food for the week, that was kind of my goal. Like that was the bar. So I'm
yeah.
like, I don't have to play forever. I'll play whatever songs I have and then I'll repeat them because there's people walking by. So yeah, it was just a street corner. And I'd seen other performers on that street. So I was sort of like, oh, well, okay, I know I'm not gonna get arrested, or at least not not if I do this real quick.
Not if
And
you're in the middle of them, so that there's someone else to arrest before you.
well, I don't want to be in the middle of it, but yeah, yeah, you don't want to be competing because you can get run off a little easier that way. But so I did
Mm.
pick a street corner, and I was like, I'm just gonna play for long enough to get grocery money.
Yeah,
I don't know how long that is, but it was sort of like a nice way of saying like, I'm gonna make a little box. This is how much money I need. I'm just gonna go do it and get over myself. And it was terrifying. It was not an
I can
easy
imagine.
thing to put yourself out in that way, but I think it took me 20 minutes to get
Oh
grocery
wow.
money. And like by grocery money, I mean like $40 to $20. Like that's how desperately like the line was for me. I just didn't
Oh
have
wow.
it. And so about 20 minutes, 20 or $30. And then I was like, oh, that was that was fine.
That's not too bad. That's $60 an hour.
Hmm.
Busking. That's the yeah.
Yeah.
This is I've had a couple of buskers. Well, not a couple of people that make their living off of busking completely on the podcast, and I've spoken to. And it's one of those things where if you told your parents when you were a kid that you were going to grow up and be a busker, there's no way that would have ever flown. Of course, you're not going to be a busker. You're going to be one of those. I don't know. What do people think of buskers? One of those vagabonds out begging, basically, and stuff like that. But it's such a viable career. It's absolutely amazing that it is such a viable career, and it's great that you found that. So $20 in 20 minutes. That's amazing.
Mhm. And that's, and I think buskers should be doing, I mean, because of my science background, I would do actually a lot of spreadsheets and I'd keep a lot of data about what I
Ooh,
was doing. And so that was a huge part of busking that I do recommend to anybody wanting to try busking is, yeah, you're going to just stab at things for a while, but take notes, keep records, write down stories, however it is you're going to do that. But you need to write down the time, the
okay.
location, how much money you made, and how long you bust. Those are 4 data points that, taken over the course of a career, will help you delineate where the successful spots are for you and also your increase in money as you go. Because I started about making, it's $40 an hour to $60 an hour. By the time I finished busking and moved on.
Wow, class. That's that's more than I make gigging at weddings and stuff. That's amazing. See, I'd be useless as a busker then because I am terrified of spreadsheets. I run a business and absolutely terrified of spreadsheets. I don't know how they work. I don't get it. One of my business coaches done a spreadsheet for me for finances one time, and I was like, And he's like, right, so just put that money in there and then it'll do this. And I was like, what do you mean it'll do this? He says, yeah, it does it automatically. I was like, wow. And this was only about 3 or 4 months ago. My mind was blown. I was like, wow.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, spreadsheet formulas are really, again, because of the science background, I had this like very data-driven mindset of it's just there as information to parse out what's going to help you and what's not. So I do think like some don't be afraid of your spreadsheets. That's how we survived. And then later when I went on the road full time with a band and then a duo, we made a full-time living on the road work because of really tight budgets and really tight financial planning and a lot of spreadsheets. So I do think one of my successes in general is total spreadsheet formats.
wow.
And that's not it's just my personal way of organizing
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
working and what's not. But I think however anybody organizes what's working, what's not, like have a system for telling how successful your ideas are. And that's
Mhm.
how I think you'll find those weird little like niches and cracks in the facade of like what you're supposed to do and what's actually working for you.
Yeah, that's really solid advice because there is, no matter what you do, there is only so much stabbing in the dark is going to, or so far stabbing in the dark is going to get you. So, be it spreadsheets, be it, I don't know, sticky notes, be it carrier pigeon to yourself.
However you track. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
have more than just a gut feeling of is this working or not.
Good stuff. Yep, I love that. That's really solid advice already. We're only a few minutes in. So you finished up busking, and then you said you went on the road and stuff like that. Tell us about that.
So my partner, my music partner, and my personal partner at the time. So I did finish my degree in Seattle, and we had moved there at the same time to be together after a long distance relationship. He's an audio engineer and was working in a studio in Seattle. So it's kind of like a match made in heaven. We met working in the
Cool.
studio
Yeah.
together. And nice, he's a guitarist and a drummer. I'm a violinist and a singer. So we had made a band together in Seattle that was doing pretty well, gigging a lot. And he just hated the dynamic there. He'd never really fit in. Seattle can be a tough place. I think if you're familiar with sort of like Scandinavian culture, then it's not nearly as strange. But there's a huge
Oh.
Scandinavian population in Seattle that kind of has shaped the culture a little bit to be quite frosty in a social sense.
Hmm. Right.
Hard to break into certain cultural scenarios. It's I think what happens when you live in the dark for about 6 months out of the year. You're
I
pretty
can imagine.
insular.
Yeah, I can imagine. So yeah, so you started gigging, and what sort of music was it that you were playing?
So we were doing symphonic rock. So if you would think of so
This is I was honest to God, I was not expecting that. Like, I'm a guitarist and a singer, and I play with a violin player sometimes, and I've played with some like kind of quite eclectic and interesting, not just your bog standard, just playing fiddle. I like kind of creative, loads of creative musicians, but never in a million years did I think a duo could play symphonic rock. That's amazing. You may explain
oh
that
yeah.
one.
So that's like, bands like Coheed and Cambria or Perfect Circle. Evanescence had a little bit of that vibe to it as well, but it's like the guitars and bass would sort of lay down the rock portion, and then I would make these like sometimes I would live loop it, or I'd make these kind of soaring epic orchestral parts over the top of that while I was singing. And so
Wow.
that was the type of music that we did. And that band was called Direct Divide. We have 2 albums out on Spotify. So if you do want to check out that project, there's a lot of audio examples. That
Absolutely, yeah.
comes back around to now because I did steal, is it stealing from previous me? I did pull 3 songs from that project into the Cosmic Expedition show, which was
Wow.
nice to be able to kind of recycle work that way. And those like the very epic symphonic pieces that were really fun to do with rock underneath. So if you're wondering what that sounds like, that's how you can find it. So we toured
Yeah.
with that project for about a year and a half, and that was just complete DIY. Like we were trying and aiming to get a record deal, which in the the United States is pretty challenging. And so our method, which didn't work at all, was to just go on the road and pound it until
Oh,
somebody noticed.
yeah. That hasn't worked since the 80s, as far as I'm aware. I wasn't around in the 80s,
Yeah.
but as far as I know from watching like telly and stuff, it hasn't worked since like Guns N' Roses. Um, which is sad in a way because that's like, you hear all these like really mad mental stories. I thought of Guns N' Roses because Duff is from Seattle, and I think they've something like that anyway. Yeah, so it didn't work out that way. Did you ever get your record deal?
No, no, never. But we
Oh,
self-produced 2 albums, and I think it's for the best because I don't think that record deals are the same as they used to be. Like there was still this we were still stuck in what I like to call now the build it and they will come mentality, which I think is one that we are sold a lot as musicians. And
hmm
I think it just makes you easy prey for scams when you're
yeah,
in that mindset.
yeah. I completely understand. It's the whole play for exposure thing, just in a different guise. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't regret any of that. We saw the entire country, and driving around the United States would take us. Oh God, we'd do it 3 months, probably 3 month windows essentially, and that would be about how long. 3 to 6 months would be about how long we'd be on the road at a time.
and did you just load up the car and like I'm assuming that you would have had like gigs and stuff booked, and did you do that like? So how do you go about even planning that? Is probably what I'm trying to ask.
I'm so sorry. It means spreadsheet.
Oh no! Oh, this is the this is like there's honest to God, there is so much rock and roll in what you're saying, and at the same time, there's just at the
No, I
same
know.
time.
The first time we did a little bit more of your standard touring where we would do venues. And so we
Mhm.
would do there's a couple resources online that have these big catalogs essentially of indie venues, and it's called Indie on the Move. At least if you're in the
Oh,
United States. They might have versions in the UK as well. I
okay.
do believe they have a catalog. So Indie on the Move was kind of more active. I don't know what it's like now because it's been, about 6 or 7 years since I looked at that. But that was a resource that we used at the time, Indie on the Move, to get the contact information for venues. And
Right.
then we would pre-plan the route based off of where we wanted to be at the time. And then we would just email a bunch of people our press kit and apply through that resource. And then we would book dates along the route. And then usually that would mean that we were responsible for then going and finding our openers for the same event. And then we were trying to basically invite bands that we had never met, never talked to come do a show with us in their town and bring their fan base because we had no fan base. And so that's where that became pretty challenging. And then we would do like Facebook ad campaigns because Facebook was kind of the big social media at the time. Instagram was just becoming a heyday thing, but not many people had adopted it. So
Yeah.
it was just like a big process. And we would book out usually about 3 months in advance, and then we would just sort of catch up. So if we were in a space, we would be booking the gig 3 months from now, and then it would all kind of like move like that. So that's why the tours were about 3 months long because
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what we could schedule, and then we would like reset and do it again. And that was the
Wow.
first round. Really hard to do, not very lucrative, a lot of door splits, which is just not a lucrative way of touring.
No,
And
not
then
at all.
merchandise sales. We ended up DIY screen printing our own merch so that we wouldn't have to we could like keep up on the demand. So we would go home, like screen print a bunch of merch, get some albums reordered, rest and recuperate, repractice, do another set, go out again. So we did that for like the year and a half, and then we hit on, and then I would busk in between in
Yeah.
different cities to like make extra cash. And then I also had like a remote job before those were cool.
Wow.
So
It
I
sounds
was like working in the car.
yeah, it sounds very, very full on. That sounds like mental. And what? So did you must have just lived in like hotels basically for a year and a half? Did you?
Oh no, we lived in the car. We had to pay
Yeah.
for
Wow.
hotels when it got cold.
Oh wow, that is that's very intense. Fair play to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So we
hope
had a
you had a big
van.
car.
We had a 40 Econoline that had a bench that would fold down into a bed. And so when it was us and the drummer, we would swap days. So we would like park at a campground, and then we had a tent and an air mattress. And so who got to sleep in what thing would like switch off every day. So like sometimes you'd be in the van and sometimes you'd be outside in the tent. And then sometimes whoever had like rolled the dice wrong that day got rained on. So I just remember like just an epically bad thunderstorm in Texas. And we woke up in the middle of the night to just like you just hear. I think there's other places in the world that this happens where you just
Yeah,
wake up to the loudest thunderclap. Like so everything's still and quiet. It's the middle of the night and you just go boom, and like the
yeah.
rain just comes down like somebody just poured a pail of water on you and it doesn't stop. So it's just
Yeah.
really dramatic, like boom and then rain. And
Yeah.
so we woke up, my husband and I woke up and we were like, oh, poor Val, we didn't put the slip cover on the tent because we were assured by a ranger it wasn't supposed to rain that night. And so I just remember all of us like, and then, immediately goes to 100% humidity in the van. And we're all
Yeah.
just like sitting there completely soaked, getting
Oh
him
no.
him and his stuff out and like getting him into the van. But yeah, stuff like that would happen. I mean, there's stories of living on the
Yeah.
road, but yeah, we would save money by just doing it that way, and met some really cool people. Met a lot of full time RVers, and
Wow.
we would in America. There's a gym chain called Planet Fitness,
Okay.
and if you pay for a monthly subscription, you can have like a guest come in with you, and they
Uh,
have these fitness centers all over the country. And so we would plan our route along, like stop at a Planet Fitness, work out, take a shower, do my hair and makeup, go to the venue, and that was our bathrooms and our showers and stuff.
Brilliant. That's that's really, really cool. That is really, really
Yeah,
cool. I
no
often
hotel.
wondered, no hotels. Well, there you go. It can be done.
Mm-mm.
Cool. And see, all the while, were you playing your electric violin, as in like your solid body electric violins, or were you playing still an acoustic with just a piezo pickup or what?
I have not played an acoustic violin for a really long time. I mean, now it's coming in more, but my I started playing electric violin in university with a marching band, and kind of didn't look back since. And I bought a violin because I saw the Trans-Siberian Orchestra perform, which is a big kind of Christmas show for those of you who haven't seen it in the United States. But it's pretty epic symphonic rock music. And one of the guys who originated that project plays this crazy 7 string violin that he built called a Viper violin. And so I really fell in love with that instrument. And so about when I was 20, maybe 19, I bought a Viper. And on that time I had a 6 string one, and now I have a 7. And so they look like spaceships. They look like these crazy flying V
Yeah.
solid body spaceships. And so that's always what I was playing because of it also has a chest harness that sets it on my shoulders. I don't have to hold it up, nor do I have to hold it with my chin. And so
Yeah.
that was a big part about being in the rock band was I could sing and play at the same time and start to
Yeah.
develop that skill set. Same with busking. I'd be live looping, singing and playing. And that was how I could kind of make that all work. So it was never almost most of my career has been done on electric violins without any kind of acoustic instrument. I have one now. I mean, I have
Yeah.
had an acoustic instrument for a while, but I just got a pickup for it in the last like 2 years because before that
Okay.
I was just all electric. It was not
All
no
electric. Yeah.
acoustic or picked up violins.
And were they always fretted? So is that the Wood violin, Mark Wood? Is that the guy that makes them?
Yeah, that's the guy that makes them.
Yeah, and I think that's how I originally came across you a few years ago. Was that I play a load of different instruments, but my guitar is my main one, and like I play everything like a guitar. I went to actually learn how to play violin, and my violin teacher told me that I play violin like a guitar. So yeah, and I of course like I've loads of guitars on the wall here, and I've got like I don't have any really fancy ones. I've just got really mental, cool looking ones because that's what guitar should be about. That's what playing an instrument should be about. It should be looking as cool as possible. And so when I saw that it was a flying V, I was like, fucking yes, that is class. And what was better was that it was fretted. And I was like, so that's this hand sorted anyway, for starters. And then I've still not gotten my hand around the bone. But where was I going with that? But yeah, why did you choose? Well, first of all, was your first one a fretted violin, or did you go for a fretted one afterwards, or what was the story there?
So I needed just a beater violin for the marching bands because talk about like you should just be seen. That one of our uh, in my university, the marching band is a little bit infamous rather than
Okay.
famous. It's infamous for being basically the drinking club with a marching problem. And
Yes, I love that. I love that's what I say about myself and my bandmate. Myself, the guy that I'm in a band with, we're like best mates, and we literally when we see if we're going and having a few beers on a gig, we literally say, "Oh, we just go for a pint," and sometimes music happens, and that's like gigs that we get paid for. So I love that. I love that. A drinking club with a marching problem. Fantastic. That is
yeah,
the name of the episode. I'm making a note of that.
and we didn't even technically march. Like it's I went to Stanford University, so it's Stanford marching bands, and it's
Yeah.
pretty polarizing entity, as it were. So you didn't even have to play an instrument if to be in the marching band. You just had to want to be in the drinking club. So you had to hold an instrument. You had to like make a half-assed attempt at playing the instrument, but it certainly
Yeah.
was not a requirement. So like the quality of the music was could be questionable. Um, we did have some quality control in place, but I just showed up wanting to play violin because that's the
Mhm.
instrument that I play. I didn't really want to start a new one. And they were just sort of not sure what to do with me. So they stuck me in the section with the piccolos. Because we read the same sheet music.
I can
So
see the correlation. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so I just needed a beater instrument, and I found one on eBay for pretty cheap. And so that's the one I first played for a while. But I trained as a violinist and a violist. So when I bought the instrument, I wanted a 5 string, so something that
Yeah.
had all both violin and viola, and I could do either one. So I thought that that
Yeah.
was cool, right? Like the body was cool. It was bright red, sounded like absolute crap, but who cares? Like it
Mhm.
wasn't the point of
Yeah.
doing that. And so a lot of my showmanship, a lot of my commitment to like the feel and the vibe of what I do was really developed during that time because it wasn't necessarily about playing well, it was about playing enthusiastically and having that enthusiasm be really infectious. And so that was a good training there of like rock out, just rock out. It doesn't matter everything else. You're not going to hear you anyways. Like you're going to get covered up by the trumpets. Who cares? You know, you can
Yeah.
have some personal, you can know you played the notes right, but literally nobody else is going to know.
Yeah. Love it.
So there was that. It was great. And then I met my other friends that I ended up starting a punk band with, like a very pop punk band, all female pop punk bands, and they needed another guitarist. Couldn't find one that would play or be able to shred on lead guitar. And well, they were like, well, she plays violin and they can play very fast, and she's very good at that. So if we need like a shredding electric guitar sound, would a violin work? And I was like, yeah, violin works for that. So that's where I started playing a little bit more specifically like rock style of music, punk style of music. And that's where I bought the Viper so that I could be a backup singer for that band and also play the lead guitar role. And, you know, in the United States, we have a drinking age of 21. I was 18
Yeah.
and 19 when that band formed. So I was sneaking in to these bars because of those
Yeah.
restrictions. And so I was the designated driver for the whole band for like 2 years, just driving
Love it.
everybody around all the gigs.
Yeah.
I
I
couldn't
love it.
drink.
Don't worry. In Ireland, our drinking age is 18, but just like you, I've been gigging in pubs since I was like 15. And we
Yeah.
just kind of, it just, everyone knew, but it was just like, I can look after them and make sure that they're okay if they're in my pub. It's fine.
Yeah, I got thrown out of a venue once, which was not more helpful because then I just got chased down by a cop for because I was standing outside and we
Uh-huh.
would always have these like crazy 80s style like dress like fishnets and short shorts and all this stuff. So I'm like, you just made the 19-year-old go wait on the curb where she got questioned for solicitation.
Oh, no
Not
way.
safer for me.
Oh, no, that's terrible. That's absolutely terrible. And they wouldn't let you
Yeah.
in even though you were playing.
I had to wait
Ah,
until I had to like wait until it was our set time. And then they were gonna let me in and we could play the set. And then I would have to like go outside again. In which case I was after the set was over, I was just like, screw you, find me. And then I just like hid from the security the rest of the night.
yes. Love it. Love it. You're just in the back shotgun and beers and be like making the most of it.
I never drank in that scenario because I didn't want the venues to suffer. You know, it's like
No, that's
if the
fair.
venues had gotten caught serving, then that's we certainly weren't gonna get asked back. So yeah, I never
For
broke that
19 years,
rule.
for 19 years old, that's far too sensible.
I'm pretty sensible. I mean, I've let loose, but in very controlled ways because I'm quite what's the word? Sometimes I know that I'm pretty manipulative as a person in some good ways. I call it a good way, but I'm sensible when it benefits me.
Okay, well, fair enough. That's good to know. That's good to know. Well, when I was so basically 16 is your 19 equivalent, and I remember my
Yeah.
mate once ruining it for all of us because Valentine's night he got caught outside the pub getting sick, and then the police were like, "Come over here to me," and he went over and he was like, "Oh well, taxi." And he ruined it for all of us. But yeah, that's a story for another day altogether. So I'm glad to see that some underage drinkers and some underage, not even drinkers, some just underagers can be underage sensibly. It's great.
I mean, there's also the like when you know you're going to drive all of your your drunk
Well,
friends
no, there's
home.
that as well. There's, in fairness, there is that as well. Yeah, there's that as well. So no, well done, you. Don't let my Irishness and everything influence younger you into being bad and misbehaving and stuff like that. But
Well, they all
anyway,
made it up for me spectacularly by taking me to Vegas the day I turned 21.
yes, I've been to Atlantic City, but I've never been to Vegas. I've always wanted to go to Vegas. Vegas looks amazing.
It's pretty hilarious, and my husband's from Vegas, so
All
we've
right.
spent a lot of time in Vegas. I've actually been busking in Vegas, which is its own funny stories.
Yeah.
There are some great stories of busking in Vegas. For a very short time when we were there, we were building our second tour van into a house and at his dad's wood shop, just in their house in Las Vegas. And so we spent about 2 months doing that. And in between, I was busking. So Vegas stories, man. I just did a performance in Vegas for a big conference in January. And so it was nice to go back and like get a little bit of the rock star treatment and actually like stay in the hotels. And it was for the big consumer electronics show, CES. And so to see
Oh.
Vegas, not only in Vegas form, but like you're just surrounded by a massive like consumer electronics show that takes up the whole strip and so many hotels and there's events going on all the time and it's crazy crowded. So that was a nice different experience to like have a little bit more of like the rock star life experience this year, which was fun.
Love it. Yeah, I remember I toured America a little bit in 2014, and yeah, you do kind of get it's not very rock star, but it is. It's like when you're like I played in one of the hotels in Atlantic City, and it is cool when you're finishing up and just like and yeah, it's cool. Where was I going to go with that? So you mentioned there about playing for the big consumer electronics show and stuff like that, and I know you do an awful lot of or a great bulk of your work is through corporate gigs and stuff like that. So how did you get into that?
That kind of dovetailed in with the busking show because when you've got a busker show, you can usually play several hours at a time, 3, 4 hours, because that's how long it
Mhm.
takes to do that kind of work. And then that would also translate into doing bar gigs or restaurant gigs. And restaurant gigs will want about a 3 hour set. And so
Mhm.
be able to be pretty, sound controlled and have a small footprint was kind of always key to doing restaurant gigs. So I got into doing corporate work by finding an agent here in Monterey, which is where my parents are. So we were kind of landing here between tours, and I damaged my voice. There's too much
Oh,
work, too many shows. Don't
yep.
talk in the bar after you're singing. That's
I used to live in Salou in Spain, playing in Irish pubs, and I done that when I was 19, and we used to sing for up to 5 hours a night every single night for like 6 7 months of the year. And yeah, like you say, talking afterwards was enough, but we'd stay up until like 9 o'clock in the morning every single night
mhm,
singing in the nightclubs and singing all the Irish songs with all the Irish people that were over there on holiday and completely wrecking our voices and then going doing it all again. So I basically spent 6 months singing and shouting and roaring nonstop, and just like you, damaged my voice. And my voice never came back until lockdown, actually, funnily enough. So
mhm.
that was one little silver lining about lockdown and all that, was that my voice finally had time to heal and recuperate. But how did you manage to damage your voice and get over that?
About same way to get exactly the same way you got it is the same way
Yeah,
I got it. It's just shows every single night and staying up way too late, sleeping in a cold van every single day did not help.
yeah,
Um, and you get the thing is you get sick on top of that problem and you have to double warm up and really take care of it once you've been ill. And
yeah.
then that can be like a little bit of a straw that broke the camel's back and like take you over the edge of really having problems. And so we had to cancel 3 months of touring and
Oh
call
no.
everybody and just say, like, if I'm not going to have permanent damage, and we have no healthcare in this country. So,
Oh no, you don't at all. No.
so there's not a solution that can be done medically if you're not willing to pay
Yeah.
exorbitant prices. So the options were pretty limited to if you don't want to have a surgically invasive procedure that you can't pay for and you will not have
Hmm.
help paying for, you have to just stop. So that
Yeah.
meant we had to stop, and I had to retrain, and I had to do it pretty much by myself. I did manage to get like an ear, nose, and throat specialist to confirm that I didn't have actual nodes.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I did invest in the diagnostic of saying like how much recovery, like how far down the rabbit hole am I with this? How much recovery am I going to need? Do I have something that needs a surgical intervention, or can I just with rest and recovery and retraining fix this? And
Yeah.
the answer was yes, I needed to rest, and so I spent 2 weeks not talking.
Wow.
Drove my
Yeah.
husband crazy.
The best money he ever spent on getting that diagnosis, I'd say, he said.
it's it's really hard to talk on a whiteboard for 2 weeks.
Yeah. I suppose, yeah, like, how do you, yeah, I suppose. Yeah, no, that's not
On a
fun.
whiteboard.
I've a mate of mine, again, from another Irish guy that was gigging out in Spain. How are you, Aaron, if you're listening? And he had to get surgery because he had those nodes, again, from just downright abusing your voice. And, like, to be fair, most of us didn't go out of our way to intentionally abuse it. The damage was getting done, regardless of whether we looked after our voice after the gig or after the fact. It was irrelevant. All the damage was getting done in just the sheer amount of singing that you're doing, and it's like any muscle. It's like anything at all. You overdo it, you're going to end up fucking it.
Mhm.
But so 2 weeks no speaking, and I imagine there would have been some sort of, like, I don't know, teas or like antibiotics or some sort of something or other.
Well, antibiotics are not gonna do anything in that because it's inflammation. So,
That's
um, tea don't recommend unless I actually don't do tea because the whole point is you're taking swelling down. Heat is gonna exacerbate swelling.
ah,
So, it's not for short-term solutions, sure, you're expanding the capillaries, you're trying to soothe your throat. Um, that's why they say, like, for singers, drink tea, but drink lukewarm tea and don't drink ice water either. So, like, extremes are where you have problems in those two things. So, like, super, super hot tea, don't do it. Drink lots of water, but drink it at room temperature, not at chilled temperatures, because you don't
yeah,
want to tighten down your vocal cords either. And so it was just a lot of research and then relearning how to phonate. And I did have a friend that was helping me through that with like training. It's like a speech therapist almost to and I think I sit, I mean, you can probably even hear it in how I talk. I sit pretty low in my vocal range for speech, which is pretty typical of women. If we want to be taken seriously, we actually speak low. And so coming off of my vocal cords when I was talking in a bar was part of that too, of
ah,
retraining how I talk after singing so that I wasn't sitting low in my range and that would sit on top of the vocal cords and grind. It's also sometimes it's called oh god, vocal fry.
Uncle Fry.
Hmm. It's a not it's usually used to denigrate women's voices, so it's like a problematic term in itself, but it is an actual descriptor. And the worst example is like the LA girl. I'm like, oh my god, that.
Oh, okay. That was very good. That was very good. I got what you meant instantly. It sounded like
Mm,
Clueless.
yeah, so that's vocal fry, and it's something that we do in our voices that has like some cultural ties into it, and so but it's bad for your voice. And so we do that, and like that wasn't helping. So not only was it relearning to sing, it was learning some patterns that I was doing that I need to come and like retool how I even think about how my voice works. And so that was a good time that I spent. So this was like a very long roundabout answer to your question of in that 3 months time of where we had to cancel all these gigs. I needed some income, so I got in touch with a local agency that was representing a lot of restaurants and would
Uh,
need constant music. And so I got tied in with that agent and was playing a lot of residencies in restaurants and bars around this little town in Monterey. It's a beachside town and has a lot of tourism. So, like,
okay.
a lot of seafood restaurants, a lot of bars, that kind of thing that cater to the tourist community. And so they like having live music in there. So I got tied in with that network. And then we have a lot of golf here. I'm right
Okay.
next to Pebble Beach, California, which has some of like five of the top 100 golf spots in the world. So we have
Yeah.
major golf tournaments here and big time companies will come in and have events because they just want to take their execs golfing. So that was
Cool.
where the corporate stuff tied in, and it just happened to be the demographic of the town that really helped catapult that into corporate work. And I'm about 2 hours south of San Francisco, and so San Francisco is a tech hub. And so that kind of
Yeah.
naturally progressed into getting in contact with some of the agencies up in San Francisco. Violin is a pretty, like, electric violin is a pretty, like, sexy, just set it up and everybody goes like, mm. So
Yeah.
being different for them was really good. And being able to do electric violin in events and parties did translate into getting a lot of work with tech up in when I say the Bay Area, it's San Francisco Bay Area, it's a big bay
Yeah.
with a lot of cities kind of scattered around it. So that's where we think of as like that tech hub, Silicon Valley. That's referring to
Oh, is
that
that up
space.
there? I didn't
That's the same
realize that
place.
that's where. Okay. I didn't realize. See, we were talking before we were. I started recording here, and like us over this end of the world, we take for granted just how huge America is. The United States is. Like you're like across the road is like 5 hours away. Do you know what I mean? And like when you see like I think I recognized the term the Bay Area, from watching Kill 'Em All, Metallica, knowing that that's where kind of they were from, and I was thinking, oh, that sounds like San Francisco, but I didn't realize that was like 2 hours away. Like California, as far as I know, California, the state, is like 4 or 5 times the size of Ireland. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's mad to think that like, yeah, it's yeah. You talk about these things as if they're like next door neighbors, and I suppose they are, but yeah, we all
I
take for
think
granted just over this end of the world.
California is a state. It's longer than it is wide. So north to south is a longer distance. And then I
Yeah,
think it's about, I want to say it's like 6 hours wide, most of the state, and
6 hours
about
wide.
6 hours wide. So like
Gee,
to
that's like
drive from,
twice. That's twice the width of Ireland. I can drive from one coast of Ireland to the other in about, I'd say, 4 hours. You'd want to give yourself 4 hours, and you could get the entire
yeah,
breadth of Ireland. That's
yeah.
mad.
So California is 6 hours wide and about, I want to say 12 hours long. No, more than that, 14 hours long.
Jesus.
From San Diego to the top of, and depends on the route that you take. If you're doing coastal, it's a lot longer, but yeah, it's a big state. And yeah, and it's not even the biggest state, and it's not even like Texas was interminably long and flat and
Yeah.
boring.
There you go. Texas, sort your life out, for fuck's sake. Come on now.
So Texas has a lot to answer for, and
All right.
has
Come on, Texas. Sort it out.
upward spiel about it.
Um,
Yeah, and that's why there's like this joke where Americans, we can't say just like we can't say that we're from the United States. When we say we're America, that's dumb because there's a lot more of North America than just the United States. But uh, then there's this joke that like, why do you always say your state? Like because each state is the size of a country, so
yeah.
you might as well. We're
Yeah.
not all the same.
Plus there's only so many names for everything. So like it's like I went through in Aberdeen in where did I go through it? New Jersey?
There's one
On
in
the way
Washington
from
too.
Is there one in Washington? There you go.
Is it?
Oh, is Kurt Cobain from Aberdeen in Washington?
Mhm.
There you go. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there you go. So Aberdeen, if you say, oh, I'm from Aberdeen, that could be Aberdeen, Scotland. That could be Aberdeen, Washington. It could be Aberdeen, New Jersey. It could be fucking Aberdeen on the moon. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. Getting a little bit off topic here now, calling out all the states and telling them to sort themselves out. So we'll try and get back, in the good books with some of the rest of them anyway. But so yeah, so that's great stuff that you're after finding sort of your niche in the corporate world, and then or in the gigs for the corporate world and all that. And I know exactly what you mean about being something different. It's really easy to sell yourself if you are in a market of one. In Aberdeen, I'm the only person that I know of. Anyone else is more than welcome to come and challenge me on this. That I'm a one-man band, so I play drums with my feet while I'm playing guitar and harmonica and stuff. And it sounds ridiculous, but it sounds ridiculous when I explain it. But when you hear it, it sounds. I think it sounds okay. I'm doing okay of it.
Do you play
Again,
multiple drums or just the kick?
no. Like it's a fully contained drum kit at my feet.
Nice.
It's called a farmer foot drum. So I've got like 7 pedals. So like a kick and a hi-hat, and then under my heels is like the snare, and then I've got a hi-hat clutch over here, and then another one that hits a tom, and then I've got a little toe post up that does a crash cymbal. So it's a full drum kit. Farmer Foot drums, look them up. You
I
could definitely,
will.
yeah, with your Flying V fretted 7-string violin, you could add Farmer Foot drum. That's
Yeah,
what,
well, I
and
mean,
in
so
fact, go on.
when I do my live looping set, I use a very strange looper, but my looping set has gone on to completely iPad based looping.
Oh, okay.
Um, so I do finger drumming and then
Ah,
record overdub my own drum patterns that way. So I'm doing finger drums and then I'll do multiple loops of drum patterns just to like set that loop, but I can't change it up in the middle unless I want to do a second set of finger drums.
yeah.
So I'm still kind of stuck in one drum pattern, but I do have drums as part of my live looping set.
Oh, there you go. Another thing you can look at is the Digitech Trio. I literally just ordered one yesterday for my band. It's basically a fancy drum machine, which sounds a bit like shit, but it listens to it's really clever. It listens to what you play. So it's like a looper, but it
Mhm.
listens to what you play for when you arm it. Then when you start playing, or when you started playing, it'll generate a bass line and a drum beat based on
Huh.
what you actually played. It's really, really clever. Now, it might sound really shit and electronic when I actually use it in my band, but we'll see. I really just want to rule it out more than that, Nas. But there you go. There's a couple of solutions for you. I was going to say your husband
Yeah.
being a guitarist and a drummer, he could get a
Yeah.
Farmer Foot drum. There you go. There's the two of you. That's all you ever need.
Yeah. And he would do, so he'd play drums when we were just doing the duo tour.
Uh-huh.
The drummer needed a social life where it's like, I know you haven't gotten laid in 2 years, dude. Like, it's really sad that I know that. So like, go, please,
Yeah.
like, please do something else for a hot minute. And that meant kind of leaving, and that's fine. But when you get really tight with you're with people, sometimes you're just like, I know way more about you than I should.
Yeah,
This is
exactly.
now
I
becoming a
know.
little codependent. So and then we went out, just my husband and I, and he was playing drums, and so I was live looping, and that was an interesting question of like we had to really sync up to a click track because he was
Yeah,
playing drums live. I'm controlling the loop. He's got no control over when things happen, but he has to stick to the click. So we had a
yeah,
click that we could both hear, and that was what we were using to like base the loops off of so that the loops were quantized appropriately. But then he would also play synth, and I would sometimes loop his synth with me so
Jesus
I could
Christ.
control when he was looping in. So like he would loop in a bass line or I would loop in his bass line, but it meant that we had to know exactly when the loop was going to happen and like really practice that. So like collaborative looping was what we ended up doing, which is a really cool thing. And to be able to like pull in his synth or not, or like reset it and all the things we had to do on the fly when we invariably like fucked it up. So I mean that was a really good collaboration for him, and he had to learn how to play like precisely to a click in order for that to work. And he was playing electronic drums so that we were still sound contained, because that was one of our
Yeah.
big things that was sellable to a lot of the venues. And so our second tour round we did breweries across the United
Oh,
States, and
cool.
yeah, so we did a whole year and a half of breweries.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I've never ever heard of collaborative looping. That just sounds like, again, the same as spreadsheets. Looping terrifies me. Like I can do like it's easier for me to play guitar, drums, and harmonica at the same time than it is to try and play along with myself
Oh, funny.
after the fact. It
Yeah.
just I just my brain is just not wired that way. So I'm always in awe of anyone that can actually get themselves into a loop and keep it going. And if like the two of you can, that's well done. Well done.
Well, I
That's
mean,
amazing.
we have to have a leader, right? Like, I mean, as long as you delineate who's really leading it, and we would do that in the band. So I would have
Yeah.
certain parts of even the full band tracks that I
Yeah.
would be looping live, and I would be stacking violin lines to get that really symphonic sound. And
Yeah.
so the technology was really about like parsing it down. So I love to teach how to loop. I love to describe like my process of looping. It ended up being huge in terms of how I compose. So
Yeah.
looping was kind of where I learned to compose. So my composition work is actually very much based in loops, which is makes it kind of more almost in the electronica genre because of the way the structures work. And so now I can loop with my iPad or I loop in Ableton Live.
Wow. Great. That yeah. I like I say, I'm in awe that you're able to actually keep on track of all that. I would overthink that, and I would be absolutely terrified that Ableton would just decide to update, or that I hadn't got or I hadn't got a track armed, or I'd soloed something by mistake, or some sort of stupid shite would happen that would just absolutely fuck up the whole thing. And if one thing goes, oh Jesus, no, yeah,
Yeah, it's happened. I mean,
I can imagine.
there technology will not always be your friend. You know, you can rely on
No,
I can totally see that. You can rely on yourself a lot easier than you can rely on a lot of technology. Technology will fail
yeah,
sometimes.
absolutely. So you were gigging away and doing all your corporate stuff and doing all your looping. And when did the burlesque end of things come into it? Because that's not something that I've ever heard of. I know
Oh,
what
okay.
burlesque is. I know what burlesque is from that episode of The Simpsons, and that's about it.
So burlesque, that was kind of a post-pandemic thing. I think we all had our strategies to cope with the pandemic, and mine was definitely, you know, my whole career was just kind of gone. You know, a lot of us,
Yeah,
our whole career
yeah,
was gone,
yeah.
and
Same here.
I never wanted to teach violin because I just had such a hard time again with authority. So I didn't really want to be that authority that I had railed so hard against. And
Huh.
due to a kid, what, you know, I felt like I had a great teacher, by the way. Like, I loved my violin teacher as a small child. Like, I'm not saying that she wasn't amazing because she was. She was, I think, the reason why I kept with it, even though I knew like the culture of classical music wasn't for me. But like, she was
Yeah,
just so lovely that she made me really enjoy the process in spite of my hatred of that authority figure. Um, so in fact, I was almost like to live up to her and teach something that I do not remember learning. And
okay.
not having gone to school, I think like the pedagogy of teaching, you can get there, right? But I think when
Uh-huh.
you start so young on such a complicated instrument, you don't remember the tools or strategies or ways that you got around problems. Sorry about that. And
Right.
so that was a big one. I didn't want to teach something I felt like I will teach adults and I'll teach people that want to expand outside of their limitations or work in contemporary violin would be happy to do that. I love teaching technology and looping and using amplified violins and all of that
Yeah,
side of it. I do enjoy, but that's more like a workshop based thing or on a case by case basis. But like
yeah,
a
of course.
studio full of kids was not appealing to me
Oh,
because
I can
their
imagine.
parents bring in expectations, and I'm sure you've seen that too.
Yep. Mhm.
And in a classical instrument, their parents tend to bring in classical expectations, and I was like,
Mhm.
don't want to deal with that. So I didn't have like an online studio that I was gonna try to build, but a lot of people did. And there was live looping and performing and live streaming.
Mhm.
We did a live streaming series, but we did it for the local musicians in town. And so I didn't do it for myself as much. I kind of dabbled in it, but it wasn't my mode. It didn't feel like performing.
Mm.
So we kind of just held on and malaised around. But in the middle of that, I'd been doing a form of working out. I did pole dancing as a fun form of working out because when I'm walking around and you're picking up amps all the time and you're putting speakers on stands, you have to be able to lift 50 pounds over your
Mhm.
head on the regular. So pole
Yep.
dancing was kind of my way of staying in shape and making sure that I had enough upper body strength to be pretty independent, which is
Yep.
important to me. And gigging around and stuff like that was just sort of like I can't not be in shape.
Yep.
So pole
100%.
dance was the way I did that. And when I couldn't do it anymore, and on top of all the pandemic stuff, it was just sort of like depression pit. Like,
Mhm.
and it
Yep.
was very clear that the pandemic was going to destroy the dance studio.
That's a shame.
So I bought
Oh, you
it.
go, girl. That's class.
So I bought it, and it's put 2 blocks from my house, which was one of the reasons I was sort of
Yeah.
like, I can walk there from here and
Yeah.
help it not die. So I bought it, and that was. I also was kind of making a bet, which is fair, that people after the lockdown would want to go back to their fitness routine faster than music was going to come back in a corporate sense.
Yeah, that's good thinking because an awful lot of people got like the live stream fatigue or they got the online lessons fatigue and they were like, yeah. So that yeah, I get that.
So I was kind of introducing a new business into my world and like new business model, but I was really ready to have something different. And so to have the pole studio and then jump into teaching that, I didn't have any experience teaching that. And so I did do an online course on how to teach pole dance, but the benefit was that I wasn't great at it, or I remember not being good at it. So teaching strategies to adults that of something I learned as an adult was much easier for me because I remembered how I overcame those problems. And
Yeah,
then I really fell in love with teaching fitness and
yeah,
dance. And so like that was a whole different business that would sort of help like bubbled up and supported not in 2020 but in 2021 while the work came back kind of
yeah.
slowly. And then by the time I was doing that, I'm teaching right now, I teach about 8 hours a week. At the time I was teaching 12 of
Oh
a
wow,
pretty
okay.
like gymnastic style fitness. And through that, got introduced to circus and burlesque because those performances really dovetail. So
Yeah,
I was meeting other dancers and they were doing circus and burlesque and met a local troupe here in town that does burlesque. And then that just sort of through the pole dancing side came into doing burlesque, came into doing circus, and then being a violinist, I again had this niche, right? Like there's other pole dancers, but there's not violinists that are in that
yeah.
community as much. So then I started writing and performing on violin for those shows because it was a way that I could still be like a lot more involved and part of that scene. So that's where I met the Damn Circus group. And then I started getting more work doing collaborations or combinations of aerial performance with violin incorporated. So now I can do violin in the air.
Wow, that's yeah. That reminds me of Tommy Lee playing drums upside down on a roller
Right.
coaster.
Yeah.
That's so cool. You should get on to that guy that makes his violins and say that that's a selling point that you can play these violins on a dance pole.
Oh, he's aware. He's really excited about it. That one, that instrument, I found out the hard way that it's a very long instrument. So works for certain apparatus is what we call this thing. So it works great on pole, not so great in a hoop. So I had to get a different solution. I have a different violin that I use in a hoop because it's a little shorter. Because I would get up to the hoop and then like the edge of the headstock would be, I'd have to like duck around the edge of the hoop to in order to make that work. So it's been a lot of trial and error, and
Yeah.
it's still not as graceful as I want. I've got a performance actually. Oh, it's raining again. I was hoping it wouldn't do that today
Oh
because I
no.
have a hoop I have to set up outside literally this week to practice for a show in about 2 weeks. That I'm like it needs to stop raining so I can set up my my rig.
Sure enough. And so does that where do you go about doing these circus, burlesque, violin shows? It's not like down the local pub, or is it, or what's the story? Or
Yeah, it
do you
is.
do you work that into your corporate stuff? How does that work?
So there is the local pub. We
You do
literally
you do burlesque circus stuff and oh wow.
yep. So there is
That's class.
literally the local pub, our local bar that we love and is really supportive of the arts. And they have jazz music on Sundays and they've got bands and DJs throughout the week. So at once a month we do a showcase burlesque show and at the bar. And we usually sell it out, standing room only. People have to wait on a line outside. It's a really popular night.
I
I
can
mean,
imagine.
because boobies, like so that's actually what I'm doing in Fringe is I'm performing with that burlesque troupe at the Fringe Festival for the Best of Burlesque show. And that was what took me there to begin with. So I'll be performing in Scotland with the burlesque troupe that I work with. And we're doing the pitch that they did to have me come in was we do a dance to the song Roxanne from Moulin Rouge. And I do
Okay.
all of the violin, like the tango violin live.
Oh, amazing. That sounds so I've never, ever heard anything like that in my life. I can't imagine, like, see, if just thinking, like, a local pub here or in Ireland just has, like, old men and, like, their dog, and, like, if that sort of a show came on,
Well,
um,
we're gonna be in Scotland. We can make it happen. Do the one
uh,
man show with burlesque involved, and I think it is really fun to do that and like just like I said, authority problems. Hello, it's me. Um, I'm the problem. To quote Taylor Swift, I'm the problem. It's me.
Yeah.
So burlesque is a jar, right? It takes people into a different space. It really
Uh-huh.
messes with their perceptions. You're doing some really interesting playing around with like female sexuality, which is pretty jarring for people to even see and be okay with. And so, um, definition of those problems. But I love it. I love messing with people's expectations in that
Yeah.
way.
That's
And
that. Yeah, I love that. That's amazing. That's fantastic. I love hearing about it, and I'm definitely going to try and get down to Edinburgh to see that. 100%.
yeah, and I
I kind
wanted
of
to inform actually my street performing as well. So my goal in Edinburgh is to be part of the busker set as well. One of the things that I do through pole is I'm pretty strong, so I can do what's called acrobatic chair. So I just have a folding chair, and that becomes the thing that I do arm balances and chest balances, and so it's very gymnastics like. So my
uh-huh.
idea is to do a 15-minute show, like miniature show, twice around because the sets in Fringe are 30 minutes long.
Hmm.
Where I kind of characterize, I have this costume all sorted out. It looks like if Bach, with all the wig and stuff, if like that style went
Ooh,
completely punk.
yeah.
And the character of it being like starting off with a very classical piece, very technical classical piece, and then just starting to get like a little uncomfortable and
Uh-huh.
messing around in my chair to the point where all of a sudden I'm upside down playing violin and I'm running around and like doing a burlesque act, playing the whole time in this completely open environment. And I won't strip all the way down because I don't want to get arrested, but like bringing burlesque into street performance, into musical performance, and like just mashing the all of it together for this big festival and making it really interdisciplinary, which is a really good challenge for me. It brings me back to my roots, but it also incorporates the crowd work. I mean, burlesque is a massive amount of crowd work, and the chops that
Yeah.
you get from interacting with people and doing that kind of vulnerability just gets people in a really interesting way that I've never seen music do by itself. So like trying to combine those things of like what are we doing as musicians? We're just communicating with people and making
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
feel something. Burlesque gets like it's like a straight shot into some really vulnerable places for people, but it's also really
Yeah.
empowering. So I really enjoy that melding of interests, and I think any art is about progressing in your art and finding ways in which the unique things that you enjoy about it, like you with like I really like really unique looking instruments. Like what's the point
Yeah.
if they're not going to look cool? And
Yeah.
your interests outside of your main thing, I think really should inform what you pursue long term and like how you improve, or otherwise you're just stagnant and you're just going to
Yeah.
do, rinse and repeat. And that would make me
Yeah. I get you. Oh no, that's absolutely wonderful and good for you. Just a word to the wise: if even in August, Scotland is cold, so just bear bear that in mind.
30 minutes is not going to be that bad.
Oh jeez, I don't know now. I don't know. But yeah, no, no, amazing, amazing. So tell us about then Cosmic Expedition. What's the story? What is that? What's the crack?
So Cosmic Expedition is a show, and the closest comparison I can make to somebody who's never seen a burlesque show or a cirque show or a cirque variety show is literally it's like Cirque du Soleil. So
Okay.
you've got I've just met this incredible group of professional aerialists through the same corporate circles
Hmm.
as actually some of my performance corporate circles, and now I have about 3 circus agencies that I work with that will
Okay.
hire me to come in and DJ for circus shows for corporate events. So the agencies have really put me in together with these groups of great aerialists. I did a show right after the pandemic. I got hired to be a violinist for a variety dinner theater show, and that's where I kind of got introduced to the main troupe, that Damn Circus. And so it's been a show that was written by the head of Damn Circus. Her name is Luna Finn, and she really enjoys putting together these cirque shows essentially. And they were going to do canned music, but it's not, or like covers, which is mostly what you do in variety shows. But I was like, why don't I just write it for this
Yeah.
show? So I wrote the whole score for the show in Ableton, and that was a really cool process because I would get the artist and I had to work together pretty closely, and they were really alarmed starting that process because they were like, "Well, we're used to doing our choreography to music that's already
Yeah.
here." And I was like, "Well, I can send you like short demos of like like sections of songs that I've written, and then you can base off of that, or you can just do what you want that you
Hmm.
would think would be cool. Send me video and I'll compose to it." So we would kind of go back and forth iteratively where I would send them a clip, they would dance to it, and then they would send it back and go, "Okay, well, it's not long enough here, or I need to do a little bit more here." And then I would rewrite the track, watching the clip. And Ableton does have a screen view that you can actually you can compose to video in Ableton. So like that
Oh,
was a nice
cool.
thing to figure out was I would have a double screen and the video would be over here and I would be working with like my MIDI files or my live violin work, re-recording, and then I could see how the music was syncing up to where they were in the choreography, and
Yeah.
then like keep iteratively going. So each track in the 90-minute show probably went through about 5 or 6 drafts.
Wow. That's a huge amount of work. Huge
Yeah.
amount of work.
And it's not finished. I mean, like the first show that we did with that was kind of for all of us, like it was a draft. Like that was the
Yeah.
part of a longer process. So I'm trying to get more opportunities for us to perform that show probably in the fall. And that I would love to go and revisit that music and actually hire some musicians to re-record it with real instruments
Yeah.
and not just like the canned Ableton. And I use native instruments a lot when I'm composing, which is
Yeah.
a really great software pack and a huge amount of instruments to choose from and some of the best sample libraries for like the cost I think that you can even
Yeah.
find. And
Absolutely.
yeah, they're amazing. So using that and using, I really like Native Instruments Guitar Rig 6. Have you messed around with that at all?
I haven't. As much as I appreciate the things like Native Instruments and all that, Sample Tank and all that kind of jazz as plugins and stuff, I like to make noise and make like the air move. So I've got a massive, like the biggest amp you've ever seen in your life. Like I'm a huge Van Halen fan, so everything I have guitar wise is like Eddie Van Halen.
Okay.
And yeah, so I just use all of that. So in a very roundabout answer to your question, no, I haven't messed around with that just yet, but I'm aware of
Mhm.
what you're on about. I know exactly what you're on about.
Yeah, and so Guitar Rig 6 is a software modeling system that you can get as a plugin for a lot of different DAWs. Digital audio workstations is what DAW stands for. So that's your groups like Ableton or Pro Tools or Logic.
Yeah,
And that way you can put your instrument directly into your recording software and then like change how it sounds. For violin, although I agree with you, I love moving air when I can, nothing is built for us. Nothing is built for our
no,
sonic texture. Nothing is built for how we create sound. So while guitar tools can work just fine, they need a lot of sculpting
yeah,
because of the dynamics of the bow. So like that's been part of my journey as a violinist, electric violinist, is to say that like the tools available through the guitar world are great. And I have amps and I use Mesa Boogie.
yeah,
Um, tube amp, I think tube amps sound great with violins. Bass amps can sound really good with violins.
yeah.
We're so on that higher register that I'm not a huge fan of Fender or Marshall for violins just
No, too
because they
bright,
tend
too
to be,
brittle.
yeah, too
Yeah,
bright, too brittle. So you can make it work. Actually, we have a Fender twin reverb, the new variations that are
okay.
not 500 pounds. They're so light.
Oh
So
wow.
I do like our new Fender because they're digital models. So you will now actually find those companies making digital models and putting them in cabs.
Ah, yes, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
and it saves your back. That this 5150 PV amp that I've got, it's the Mark One from like 1995, and it literally it weighs an absolute. It's like it weighs a ton. It's basically a head with a 2x12 cab completely in one unit. It's not the
Mhm.
size of any other. It's like it's twice the size of any other combo I've ever seen
Wow.
in my life. So yeah, yeah.
And then no wonder you're not wanting to go take that down to the 5 minute wave pub
No,
because
God forbid.
so I also use a lot of Line 6, the Line 6 Helix
Yeah,
line of tools for the same reason because it's all modeling. So when there's not a solution to for me anyways, and I can use digital tools to sculpt and do that myself, I do prefer that. I would love the ability to go back to having like a massive pedal board. I really enjoyed my massive pedal board, but when I say massive pedal board, I need about 5 or 6 pedals in the chain to just do that sculpting job before I
Yeah.
even get into the fun stuff.
Yeah.
So that was kind of part of it. Was I needed, like, I had a preamp that was really specific to piezo pickups to like help tone down the grinds
Hmm.
that you hear with piezo with a bow, and then I had a bunch of MX pedals that were like EQ sculptors,
Yeah.
that were just a visual EQ that I could sculpt down. In fact, on my phone for the longest time, I just had my favorite settings of that pedal as my background
Yeah.
screen, so that when I
All
had,
right.
if they got knocked about, then I could like reference this photo. I didn't even have to open my phone to do it. It was just there
Genius.
as
Genius. Yeah.
touring
Well
problem.
done.
Like somebody has knocked around my MXR acute and I need to re-get it back to its settings that I like. Um, so that, and then I have like other EQs on the back end and overdrives and delays and stuff like that. And so when it all got put into like one digital format, the quality wasn't any worse, in my opinion. I do love pushing air through an amp when I
Yeah.
can get away with it, but 99% of my work in corporate is you need to just set up and get your stuff down on the floor and go. And a lot of
Yeah.
times, if I'm doing aerial work, I can't touch anything. I'm in the air. So it has to be something that not only is compact, but it has to be really reliable and it has to not get knocked about. And I can't be fussing with, patch cables or power problems in the middle. So
No.
Line 6 has been a good model for that.
Yeah, it's something that I never considered before. Is that, yeah, of course, all these guitar amps, they're not going to be geared towards like the electric violin or any sort of, like, even I play electric mandolin, in my band, and even at that, like I'm at the moment getting a new pickup wired for my electric mandolin purely because it just doesn't match up with an electric guitar amp, no matter how much you try and EQ and match it and try to tone down all the harshness and the top end sparkle. It just doesn't match up. So yeah, it's interesting that someone else is having that issue. I never would have thought of it. I would have just I tend to plug absolutely everything into my 5150. I plugged my acoustic mandolins into the 5150 once just for the pure hell of it. Yeah, I plugged
Yeah.
harmonica into it for the pure hell of it, and that was fun. But yeah.
And I've done direct into a lot of different scenarios and setups, and so I've got a really specific effects chain that I'm always happy to get into, because my thing is, like, I think some people get very proprietary and weird, like Metallica, about their setups and how they run, their audio chains or their sound chains, and I just think that that's such a waste of time, because it doesn't matter if you're using the same tools, you're still not going to sound like the same player.
Oh yeah. 100%.
So
Yeah.
I'm super transparent about what tools I use. I'm super transparent about like the solutions that I found, because I feel like the more violinists are familiar with those tools and the more that they talk to audio engineers and the people in clubs about what they're doing, and we can share that information. I might show up to a club one day and the audio engineer doesn't boost the high end when I plug in.
Yeah.
It's hard of
It'd be
that.
lovely. Yeah, it would be absolutely lovely. Yeah, I feel you. I feel you. But in fairness, I don't have any gigs that I turn up to, and I'm always the sound engineer.
Oh, okay.
So
That solves
yeah.
that problem. I mean, the
But
amount of time, and then now I work with a lot of DJs, and so I do DJ simply because I got so sick of talking to them about it, and it's just like, I'm just gonna take your gigs because you know nothing about sound and it's driving me nuts. So
that was my next thing. Is like DJs think they're sound engineers, and they are just simply not. Just
yeah, I
simply not.
mean,
Yeah, they love living in the red, and they're just like, you're just like, oh, stop, please.
yeah, the amount of times I've shown up to like gigs and I tell them what I need in advance, which I try to keep it like stupid simple. I'm like,
Hmm.
1/4 inch input or one XLR input, and you can choose. So like whatever boards you have, I'm gonna be able to work with it. And then I've showed up, and now I have a cable that I have an adapter that I wish I didn't have to have it. It's those like double RCA to
Auxiliary cable.
1/4 inch.
Yeah,
I'm like, that's not like the impedances alone.
I know.
I'm going
Yeah,
like, that's not how sound works. I hate you.
no. I know. It is soul destroying, and that's actually a very good way of looking at that. I never thought of it that way. Is that suppose it all starts with you. Nothing changes if nothing changes. So it has to start somewhere. Has to start
Yeah.
somewhere, I suppose. So good for you not being a gatekeeper like all them people with Metallica. Do you remember? Did you watch Stranger Things
Yeah.
on Netflix? And do you remember when Master of Puppets was on it, and like that epic scene where Eddie was on like in the Upside Down, and then
Yeah.
people were going mental online. It's like, oh, you only fucking know Metallica from like Stranger Things. You're not really fucking a Metallica fan. You're just like, fuck off. Stop being a dick.
Yeah. Well, even Metallica was just like, we don't care how you buy our music or
And
why you
and
buy
why
our music.
and why would they? And why would they? Someone that knows Master of Puppets from Stranger Things, their money is just as good as someone else that has the entire back catalogue 7 times. As the fella in,
Yeah.
in our local pub at home when we were 16 used to say, our money is just as good as someone else who is of age. So it's all good, like it all swings and
Yeah.
roundabouts.
And that reminds me of like one time I was playing in one of the restaurant bars and it was late at night and it was during some kind of golf tournament and I have this rule like violinist that I always get asked to play Devil Down in Georgia.
Oh yeah,
So and I'm fine with it, but I'm just so tired of being like that's apparently the only song I know how to play is Devil Down in Georgia. So I
that's
have
hard.
this rule. It's just
I used to
one. I
play
mean,
it.
it's a fast, it's a fast riff, but like
Yeah,
once you've done it a million times, it's not hard anymore. It's just like the same thing. I mean, I do need to actually practice it more than I do, so that I don't embarrass myself when I do play it. But for the longest time too, busking, I would get that request, and
yeah.
I had the best response. Like I found my best strategy when something is requested, like or Freebird,
Oh yeah.
Freebird or
Oh,
Down with
oh,
Georgia, any.
that guy died today. One of the last original member
What?
of Sinner Sinner died today. Yeah.
Oh, I haven't been on Facebook or like any social media. So I don't
Well,
know,
there you
but
go. There you go.
it's early morning. Not early morning. Now it's almost noon for me, but like it's morning for me.
Yeah.
So no, I did not see that. But
Well, there you go. See, it's because I'm actually in the future. You see.
yeah, exactly. You're in the evening times of the same day, so you are in the.
Yeah. I always used
But
to.
that's all.
Yeah. I always used to wonder as a kid. Is like, why? This is so stupid. But I was always like, why do I not just phone somebody in Australia? Because the lotto has already happened in Australia, in Ireland. Do you know what I mean? I was like, how has nobody thought of this?
Time travel is real, and nobody knew about it.
Exactly. It's like, what do you mean you're 5 hours ahead? Tell me the fucking lotto numbers. Anyway, yeah.
I love that so much. But
And
my
carry on.
strategy for a request, like say you're a bar, a pub request, and so when people ask me to play that song, I go, okay, $50, or
Yeah.
you have to sing it. I will
Oh,
I will take your money or your dignity.
fair enough.
Right. Because it's never done me wrong. Because if there's a song that somebody's willing to sing and they don't want to pay, I'm just sort of like, well, you can have the song for these two things. Money is one gate and dignity
Yeah.
is the other gate. And usually whatever they pick, I'm fine with. Because I've had people decide to sing it and it's just this like everybody comes together around this. This person is now going to sing this song. They're going to sing Devil Down in Georgia. It sounds dumb when I sing it because I don't have that like deep southern twang and it
Yeah.
doesn't sound that good. So they just want to hear the riff. They don't.
Aye, that's all anybody wants to hear. That's it. I used to play
Right.
on an harmonica, and people used to think it was so cool. And I was like, just like you, I don't have that Southern American accent. I've got an Irish accent. So I was singing "Devil Went Down to Georgia" in an Irish accent.
I think that would work though. But yeah, it's my way of getting out of it. But so I did that, and then apparently these guys at this bar, they were like, "Yep, here's $50." And then apparently that set off a bidding war for what song I was going to play next, and they were
Oh,
trying to outbid each other for me basically being their jukebox. And I was like, great, this is perfect. But
that's
that meant some
amazing.
songs that I'm like not super familiar with playing. But the one that I was familiar with playing was Enter Sandman. And I got that request in like $100 bill. And I was like, yep, this is what we're doing. So I did a whole like impromptu live looping version of Enter Sandman, which was
Ah,
pretty fun and hilarious. So that was like my little Metallica like moment to shine where I'm like,
yeah. That's a far better way of dealing with it than what I do because I get asked for Wonderwall and Wagon Wheel constantly. Constant, and I
You just
hate, oh, Jesus, I hate Wagon Wheel. Do you know Wagon Wheel? Do you?
oh god, yeah.
I hate Wagon Wheel. My God, I don't know if I've ever hated anything as much in my entire life as I hate Wagon Wheel. And I usually tell people to fuck off. It's the worst song in the world, and get an imagination and listen to some better music. And that's usually how I deal with
Just have
it.
them sing it or demand a higher tip. Because they're
No,
gonna
but
sing it like a drunk asshole, but that's not your fault.
yeah, but then if I let one person sing, then I have to let everyone sing. And we don't get tipped over this end of the world at all.
That's
It
true.
doesn't really happen. That was one thing I do really miss about gigging in the States. Was one night we were playing, and we were literally on the last song, and like we were only 10 years ago, 2021 at the time, and this crowd came into the pub anyway, and they says, "Oh, will you do whatever song it was?" And we says, "Oh no, we're finished, sorry." And someone says, "Oh, no, 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 you can't be finished. No, that's not happening. It's not happening." And we were like, "Well, it fucking is." And he was like, "No, no, no. How much to play on for an extra hour or whatever?" And my bandmate says, $100. And I says, "Each." Just not realizing that we'd actually get $200 straight into the bucket. And we played for another like 15, 20 minutes, and they left. And we were like, "Grand, perfect, sound, extra 200 quid." And yeah,
Yep.
so that's one thing I really do think that we should incorporate over here. It's usually people send up shots and pints and beer and stuff. But if I'm driving, that's no use to me.
Yeah, that's not helpful. That's actually so back to burlesque.
Yeah,
Burlesque is a high tip environment because it's the same thing. Like people were literally, and I've had this happen where I've been like doing something upside down, or like I'm in my hoop, or I'm doing something like that, and I've had like tips like bounce off my face because they ball up dollar bills really tight and they throw them at you on the stage. So that's always been funny, but because it's like you take clothes off and people are like, yeah, and they throw money at you.
yeah. That's
So
the
I'm pretty a
yeah.
high tip. I think I'd be very alarmed because it is sort of my metric of success, right? So like being in the United States, I think now I'm a little nervous coming over there for busking, but I think busking seems like it's different in terms of like that tip expectation.
Ah, no, don't, yeah, no, no. Busking is definitely yeah, because you're not getting hired by Edinburgh to play.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't even know who you'd Edinburgh City Council, I suppose, is who you'd have to, or whatever. So we don't get that. It's not that it's frowned upon or anything. Like if it happens on occasion,
Mhm.
but it's very very rare that, like, I would say I do 100 200 gigs a year, or I would have. I used about last year I would have done about 200 gigs in the year, and I'd say twice people tip me.
Mhm. So here
So
was the thing I used to do when I had a before the pandemic, I had a regular, every once in a while I'd do like a monthly set as a DJ violinist at a
yeah,
local dance club. And the bartenders, I knew the manager and the bartenders, and if there was a certain bartender there or manager there, we had a deal. And this is actually something borrowed from a strip club. So if you can
yeah,
get this working, it works really well. Where you say, if somebody buys me a drink,
uh-huh.
charge them for the drink, but give me something that looks like it and is non-alcoholic, and we split the cost.
Oh, genius.
Mhm.
Genius. So you can't get away with that here because I drink Guinness, which is like, how are you going to
Ah,
fake that?
get a whiskey shot, dude. I always
Oh,
get
God.
so I would get my drink of choice in that scenario was always gin and tonic. Easy to
Yeah, because you can
cover.
get away with that, no problem at all.
Right. So, but that's as a DJ, right? And so like
Yeah, yeah.
then they would be like, "What do you want?" And I was like, "I want a gin and tonic." And so I said, "If I order a gin and tonic, give me water with a lime in it. And if I order anything else, then you can give it to me. But like that's the drink that I'm gonna order if I don't want a drink."
Very good.
And
Very
maybe
good.
it's like deceptive and lying, but it's like you're gonna pay for a drink for me, and I can't drink as many drinks as I'm gonna get. So take their money and just like split it out. You take half of that cost, and I'll take half of that cost, and like we both make a little money on the side. But then you
I love it. As before we finish up, is there anything else that you're working on just now?
So I have the Cosmic Expedition music. I'm hoping to have that out in a downloadable format so people who can't necessarily see the show can still hear some of the music. That should be coming out in the fall of this year. And then I'm also maybe going to get finally a third solo album out onto all the platforms with some of my original songs as well as some of my live looping work and covers. a lot of that stuff it actually does already exist on YouTube. So if you'd like
Uh-huh.
to see any kind of the work that I do, or see any of that and see me actually live looping in real time, you can go to YouTube and search Razz, as well as Spotify. I have 2 albums out already that are mostly my live looping, singing, and violin work. So lots of content if you're interested in what I do. If you would like anything about, I guess, the philosophies that we've talked about today, I'm an open book. I love chatting with people. Please DM me on Instagram, Facebook. You can also reach out to me through my website, razzvo.com, and happy to like chat about anything, as it seems I just like to meet other people that are interested in music, interested in arts. If you are local to Scotland, and I know that's a big country for you guys,
No, it's not.
but
It's not.
have
It's not that big. It's not that big. It's about 4 hours wide, I'd say.
yeah, and I will be at Fringe Festival, and I'm hoping to release the details of that, where I'll be, and get on that kind of busking train. And I'm sure I'll be posting on social media when I'm actually there, over in Edinburgh. So I'm excited
That's
to get back over to Europe.
That's excellent. Well, all of those links will be in the description of the episode. For now, let's just finish up with a really quick fire round, and we'll let you go. So, quick fire round is just some like I kind of explained. It's like icebreaker questions at the end, because there's no fun in doing things the right way around. So, but they've nothing to do with music or anything like that. Just a bit of crack. So, first question, Razz. What is the most adventurous thing you've ever done?
I played violin in the middle of the Bikini Atoll, which is where the United States tested nuclear weapons. It's on my YouTube.
It's literally the most American thing I have ever heard.
It's pretty out there. So yeah, that's on my YouTube. That's the craziest thing I've ever done. Is go into the middle of a nuclear test site and play an instrument.
Okay, that is going to be hard bet. That is going to be hard to beat. Right. What's the best vacation you've ever taken?
Ooh, the Philippines.
Oh, I love you. I'd love to go to the Philippines.
Mm,
When were you
That
there?
was
What was the crack with the Philippines?
so my dad's a marine biologist, and so every summer we would go do different research sites in the South Pacific, and the Philippines is insane in terms of you meet people, everybody's friendly, none of your travel plans are going to work the way you think they're going to, and it's just an adventure the whole way through. But like the culture is amazing, the food is incredible, and the people are just some of the most like lovely, helpful people. So it's like you don't mind that your travel plans have all gone to hell, because everybody's just helping you solve them all the
Oh,
time.
cool. I love it. I love it. I was over in like Singapore and Hong Kong and Bali for our honeymoon a few years ago, and you're right, it is just everything over that end of the world is just better. It's just so much better and so much nicer and friendlier, and everyone just does what they're meant to do, and they're just sound, and it's great. Cool. Right, let's do a couple more. What is the funniest joke you know?
Oh, what do you call a drummer without a girlfriend?
I don't know.
Homeless.
But there you go.
A lot of drummer jokes.
Uh, An awful lot of drummer jokes. Yeah. God love them. They do get the wrong end of the stick. Ah, Jesus Christ. No, enough of that. Enough of that. Right. Let's do one more thing. Or one more question, and we'll leave it there. What is the biggest risk you've ever taken? Are we playing in that nuclear place as well?
That was actually pretty legit. We were there with a film crew. It was fine. They wouldn't have risked themselves. I think it always feels like a big risk to go from making a living doing something a bit more stable, relying on other people, to going at it on your own.
Yeah.
So, but once you get in the habit of jumping off that cliff, the next time doesn't seem as big. So the first jump off the cliff for me was definitely touring and being kind of essentially homeless and dealing with that of living in the car. So I think that was what felt at the time like the biggest risk in terms of change. Buying the pole studio and getting into an entire different business model was also another one. But by the time you're kind of used to that, and you've landed on your feet a couple of times, what might in the outside world seem to be a bigger risk doesn't feel that way, because you've got a little bit more practice at landing on your feet. So I would say it's always the first one, the first leap that you take off that cliff. And then when you land on your feet, you get to maybe minimize the rest of them, even if they do, even if they're bigger risks financially or whatever. So
Yeah.
that first tour would be it.
I think that's a lovely note to end things on. As I said, all links to where you can find Razz and all that kind of jazz are going to be in the episode link and description and all that jazz. Razz, thanks very much for your time today.
Thanks for having me. It's great chatting with you.